Is the organization misogynistic? Well, I will show you in the publications that as far back as the 1930s, as women, we have literally been addressed as second-hand to men. We've either been a sack of bones and a hank of hair, or we're too emotional. Our duties are not in the congregation, but at home, and in our service in any capacity. Only. Women are to be submissive to the men, whether it's their husband and, if they're not married, any man in the congregation. We still cannot have parts on the meetings or assemblies other than demonstrations. We cannot have a say in how the congregation is run, like the elders do. We cannot take the lead in meetings for service. We cannot have a lead on the LDC. We cannot have a lead in anything if a man is present. I remember one brother having all of us sisters straighten out used nails at a Kingdom Hall build because he could. As sisters, we couldn't disagree with him, so we picked up the nails and straightened them with a hammer. What are women still good for today within the organization? Well, we get to clean the Kingdom Hall and the Assembly Hall. We can help with maintenance, building, acting, and taking care of the household. Also, going out in the preaching work. Those are women's duties in the organization, aren't they? But is that biblical? The organization likes to use scriptures as 1 Corinthians 11:3, where it states the head of the woman is the man. But what else is in the Bible that seems to really get overlooked by the organization? Well, at Exodus 15:20, we see that Miriam was not only Moses' sister, she was also a prophetess. How about Deborah? Read Judges 4 and 5. She was not only a prophetess, but a judge as well. Barak wouldn't go to war without her. If you do any research on Deborah outside of the organization's JW org, you will see she was a leader in Israel for many years. 2 Kings 22:14 talks about the prophetess Huldah. Nehemiah 6:14 speaks of Noadiah, the prophetess. Isaiah 8:3 speaks about an unnamed prophetess. Okay, well, how about the New Testament? Look at Luke 2:36. Here you see the prophetess Anna. Yet the organization never emphasizes the role of women like those women as prophetesses and leaders in the Bible, do they? The organization only really emphasizes the men leaders and prophets. That's who we are all really taught about. So, what has the organization said regarding women in the publications and talks over the last 100 years? Now, I'm not going to go into Charles Russell. I did a whole video on his wife, Mariah, if you would like to see how he felt and what he did as a husband. It wasn't good. What we're going to do is first take a look at the organization's publications over the years since Russell, starting with Joseph Rutherford. From here on out, I'm just going to refer to Joseph Rutherford as the organization from now on, as he was the faithful slave at that time. So how have women been portrayed and used within the organization over the years since Rutherford? What has the organization said about women over the years? We have to go all the way back to 1930. In the April 2nd, 1930 Golden Age, a question was asked. will husband and wife live together after the resurrection is completed if both are in harmony with God? Well, as you'll see, the answer was not a good sign for women going forward. The answer that was given to that question was, the scriptures do not reveal what the relationship of men and women will be after the resurrection is completed. But then it goes on to say, whether the identity of the sexes as such will be preserved, we do not know. There have been well-authenticated instances in which women have been transformed into men, and it is possible that this transformation may become general, and we should all be brothers together. So no women. And you can still see that in the organization's depiction of the anointed in heaven to this day. Within the last 40 years, they have always been men, white men. But this was only the beginning. In 1931, the first installment of the 3-part series Vindication books, we see this bizarre, weird rant against women in which the organization's, actually Rutherford's, sexism and misogyny was fully shown. Under the section headed Women to the Fore, we start to see how the organization truly felt about women. Here, we see the organization condemning the enfranchising of women in Christendom. The organization went so far as to link the empowerment of women with the involvement from Satan following his ousting from heaven. According to the organization, it was unthinkable for a woman to have any role of responsibility, either in religion or politics, and to allow any woman any influence in these areas was to invite God's wrath. I guess the organization felt it was their duty to warn against any women having any type of responsibility in the congregation or in the organization. We were to be put in our proper place, and the failure of any man to notice this was not due to enlightened, progressive thinking. No, it was plain cowardice on his part. Somehow, the organization felt threatened by women having a powerful influence over the men, including the congregation or otherwise. We see how women were to stick to their proper place, taking care of the household. It was just simply wrong for their voices to be heard and given equal weight to men. But that wasn't the end of it. The organization then went on to say that an act of chivalry by men was being tantamount to worshiping women. So if you were in the organization in 1931, when the Bible students became Jehovah's Witnesses, you had to believe that simply rising from the table when a woman approached, or removing your hat when a woman entered the elevator, represented a subtle scheme of Satan aimed at contorting the proper position of man and woman. Then it went on, showing how Mother's Day was an elaborate conspiracy by the devil to deflect special honor and worship away from God and toward women. The organization stated that one of Satan's first orders of business when he was kicked out of heaven in 1914 was to influence the world leaders to inaugurate the celebration of motherhood on a special day. Basically, what was said about Mother's Day was that it was Satan's subtle way of getting ready for his showdown with God at Armageddon. And so that's why all witnesses today do not celebrate Mother's Day. It's due to the organization's 1931 condemnation of Satan's satanic plot respecting women that you can credit. It's not biblical. Here's just part of a transcript of a talk that Joseph Rutherford gave at the 1941 Regional Convention. Remember, he was the faithful slave at the time, just as Mark Sanderson and the rest are today. So imagine any one of them saying anything in this transcript. Rutherford's idea of any good and faithful service by women involved their willingness to place and promote his writings and recorded messages at every opportunity. Basically, they were to go out in service. He even asked why any man would tie himself to any woman who were nothing more than a stack of bones and a hank of hair. Excuse me? I'm what? I'm a stack of bones and a hank of hair, unworthy of any responsibility in the congregation or the organization, and my place is at home taking care of the household and going out in service. Personally, as a woman, seeing this is very demeaning and upsetting. My husband's grandmother was at that convention when he said that, and she was not pleased when she heard him say any of the things he was saying. For that matter, none of her friends from the hall were pleased either. Again, imagine any of the governing body members saying women are a stack of bones and a hank of hair today. Yet they still say everything else. Here's the August 22nd, 1947 Awake. Here we see how the suffrage movement, which was the precursor to the women's right movement of the 1960s and 70s, how this really took women out of the home where they belonged. So, really, what was gained with the suffrage movement? The woman really belongs at home. In the September 22nd, 1950 Awake, after stating that the suffrage movement did help and how the Bible in no way deprives women of their rights or their privileges of education and cultural advancement, yet such progress should be used to fit her for her place in life, not man's place. What is her place? To support her husband and take care of her home and family, and go out in service. Okay, we've hit the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, so let's go on to the 60s. In the October 22nd, 1965 Awake, under Are You Ready for Marriage?, we see the importance of what to look for in a mate. A woman was to look for a man who was able to support her, both financially and spiritually. What was a man to look for in a good wife? Does she know how to cook, clean, iron? And is she spiritual? Will she support you? In the 1966 book Life Everlasting in Freedom of the Sons of God, now remember, this is the same book that showed 1975 was to be the end of mankind's 6,000 years existence and the start of Christ's millennial reign. But that's all in my video on 1975. I'll put a link to that in the description for you. Anyhow, we see in this book, in the chapter, The Places of Man and Women in God's Arrangement, that women are not to be preachers on the pulpit. In other words, they can't give talks other than presentations on the stage at the Kingdom Hall. Their place was to be supportive of their husbands and to take care of the home and to go out in service. Okay, 70s. There were lots. Here are just a couple articles that were in the publications. There were also a lot of announcements for the Freedom of Sons of God book, for that chapter, that particular chapter on women and their proper place. Maybe they got it better in the 80s. Nope, they didn't, as you see here. What about the 90s? Well, here's the book we studied through the 90s as families, The Secret of Family Happiness. Same thing. Be supportive and submissive to your husband and go out in service. That brings us to the 21st century. Nothing has changed. Women can still not hold any positions in the congregation. What did the Bible say? Didn't Exodus show how Miriam was a prophetess? How Deborah was a leader, prophetess, and judge? Huldah, Noadiah, Anna, all prophetesses. Or what about Queen Esther? Since as far back as the 1930s, women have literally been addressed as second hand to men. We've either been a sack of bones and a hank of hair, or we're too emotional. Our duties are not in the congregation, but at home, and in our service in any capacity only. In 1971, at Oakland, California, Samuel heard of the governing body. He wasn't at the time, but he is now, and gave a talk entitled The Value of Our Theocratic Sisters. Here's what he said. He said, scientists say that the cranial capacity of a woman is 10% smaller than that of a man. So now this shows us that she's just not equipped for the role of headship. Her role is in one of subjection to the man. Her role is that of submissiveness, and that means that she should recognize that she is a woman and be glad to be a woman. I'm sorry, but that's almost as bad as saying I'm a hank of hair and a bag of bones. Almost. Today, women are still to be submissive to the men, whether it's to their husband or any man in the congregation. We still can't have parts on the meetings or assemblies other than demonstrations. We cannot be an elder. We cannot take the lead in anything if a man is present. But we are good for preaching, maintenance, building, acting, and taking care of the household and going out in service. What about within the family? Well, can a woman speak up if it goes against something her husband brought out in family worship? Can she lead family worship with her husband? What about her baptized son? What if she has a difference of opinion than her husband? Can she voice it in front of her children? Can she pray for the family? Or is she to always show her husband submission? I have one other question. Why are women so passively aggressively put down in the organization? What do I mean? How many times have we heard this? Yes, you are wonderful, sister. We all love you all for what you do. Thank you so much for cleaning and all of your preaching work. But when it comes to taking the lead in anything, what happens? Sorry, sister, here's your vacuum and dust rag. Have you heard of the Elder's Manual? How can there be a more sacred book other than the Bible that we as women are not even to know or touch? If I can read my Bible anytime I want, why is that book more sacred? Why is that book more secret? Why do they have that book that women cannot read? A woman's place is not only preaching or taking care of the home or looking after the children, giving demonstrations, cleaning, building, what have you. Women are much more capable of doing things like leading, like Deborah did, as well as being prophets, like the other women. Yet that's not how the organization views women, is it? Well, that's my 2 cents for what it's worth. I would love to hear what you think in the comments. Please let me know what you think about this. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, please like. Algorithms, it really does go out to more people that way. And if you really enjoyed it, please subscribe and follow along for more. And as always, thank you for watching.